Welcome to TGIF.
Well, I'm pretty sure they know that we have a grandbaby. If you follow our life at all or join us at church, you know that our first grandbaby was born just 3 months ago. And what a joy that has been. And one of the things we love to do with them, of course, we do the baby talk. Y'all are with me. You know you did that too with your grandkids and even your kiddos. But what I love to do is when we're just always looking at them and talking with them and saying, you know, what are you going to be? What are you going to do when you get big? And just having no idea. But we trust that God has and had the perfect plan before Maverick was even...
Takes us to the word of the day, which is born.
I can't even imagine a year from now, 2 years from now, what he'll look like. And then as he grows up, what he'll do. But I trust God has a perfect plan.
Yeah, and God has so many perfect plans, and sometimes we're just not paying attention. But we are starting a new book today. The book of?
Exodus.
Wow, exciting.
So today we are basing it off Exodus 1 through 3. And your homework, if you want to get ahead for next TGIF, is Exodus 4 through 14. If you did not join us for Genesis, you can go back and do some makeup work and catch those 5 episodes as well.
Yes, and so we are looking at Exodus chapter 2, verse 4 today. The baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. And this is the story of the birth of Moses. And Moses' mother was very proud and very excited with the baby, but Moses was born in a very complicated time. But do you realize that from the moment anybody has ever been born, there's always somebody watching? If it's a parent, a grandparent, aunt and uncle, your guardian, it could have been, a host of people when you were born, watching you as you're growing. Somebody's always watching and wondering. And you made that comment, we're wondering.
Yeah.
Well, Moses, his mom knew that he was special. And so we have this story that is unfolding. And for us, when we are trying to understand, watching closely and being born, Moses' mother did see this something special, knew she had to try to save him in this circumstance. But what we know is God is at work in all of these circumstances. So even the difficulty of, the Pharaoh having said, all Hebrew babies need to be thrown into the river. The girls could survive, but the baby boys had to be thrown into the river. That had been just earth-shattering to any mother.
As a mother, I can't even imagine.
And so she comes up with this idea to what I believe that God put in her to make this basket and float the basket into an area where she thought maybe somebody would find her. And sure enough, somebody does. But what I like about this piece of scripture is that the baby sister is wondering. She is just off in the distance and she's watching. Maybe she's wondering, is this baby special like mom has said? Or maybe she's even wondering about her own specialness. Am I special too? She's really leaning in to see what will happen and what God will do in this moment. So it's interesting for us to think about circumstances. When we think of the circumstances that are around us all the time, that circumstance was a terrible time to be born into, but there are so many people that are, that struggle in circumstances and allow the circumstances to determine their lives.
Right, and in that moment, was Moses' mom thinking or believing he was designed for purpose as he's put in a basket and drifting down the river, trusting and believing my child was born for purpose. And I think about all of the families who have a child born with a disability. And the disabilities are on all ends of across the spectrum of different kinds of disabilities, and to think, wow, what's the purpose in that person's life? And it's hard to imagine. And then you look at poverty, and then the years of slavery and those types of things that still go on today, race, ethnicity, a financial status, where people are maybe labeled. What purpose do they have? What can they contribute to the world or contribute to my life? But-
impossible odds sometimes. It just seems like the impossible.
And that's a real good response with, but God. If we really believe and trust that God designed every person for purpose, even though we're going to continue on in Moses' story and we know things change up a little bit from that innocent baby floating down the river to be rescued, God had purpose in it all, even with what's next.
Yeah, and God, we see the next one is this intervention. You have to think that Pharaoh's daughter, being raised around Pharaoh, had a very stern upbringing, and you don't trust those Hebrews, or you don't go near them, you don't do anything. Yet, in this moment when the baby comes in this basket, her heart is softened. That is God. I mean, that is absolutely God, because I can only imagine everything flowing through her mind. It's like, oh man, if I take a Hebrew baby to my dad, I mean, he's going to be so upset. Everything going through her mind. And yet, in this moment, God softens her heart. She accepts the baby, and she does everything she can in her power to raise this child. That's God at work.
Absolutely. And even so, the rescue of the baby, perfect end to a story. But we know Moses goes on to
And when we
get
talk
into a little
about
bit of trouble.
when we talk about who's watching, Moses makes this comment, right? It's when he is trying to break up an argument and then kills an Egyptian. He first, what did he do? He looked around to make sure nobody was watching, so that he thought he was going to get away with this, and yet he's found out and he has to flee. We don't realize that people are always watching us. We're always being watched, and we have to be on guard with that, especially if we're a Christian and if we believe in God, that our testimony comes through those moments when we are being tested like that. And do we believe in God and how God is at work? And so this is the perfect...
And are we recognizing that because people are always watching, and it's not just, I hope no one saw that, run a red light. Woo, I hope there wasn't a cop watching.
Got away with that one.
Yeah, and then you have a first-time driver, student driver, who just watched you run that red light, and the teacher can pretty much say, don't do that. But people are watching. That is an understatement. And what example are we setting?
And when Moses gets caught, he feels like he has no worth. He has no value. The only thing he can do is run. How many people in this world do we see? They just run. They flee. When things aren't going right and it looks bad, they've done something wrong, they just flee. They run from it. And yet God is still at work. God knew that he was going to use Moses, and we're going to learn a lot more about Moses, but this last little part is the burning bush. The burning bush story, where this bush is on fire but never consumed, and God's voice comes from it, and it's a calling. It's Moses' calling coming from the bush. God is calling him, you must lead my people out of Egypt. What? That's my calling?
Right, after what I just did.
What I've done, who I am,
and my
have value. This is the God.
And my birth story.
Yeah.
And this is where you brought me. Just that example of how God uses everyone and everything for purpose in all situations. And I think when you mentioned running, when we run from what we would consider bad choice, failure, I mean, broken relationships, divorce, the things that are just part of this world, those circumstances don't define God's purpose for your life. He has a perfect plan. And we have to trust that, because even after that situation you just went through, God has a calling upon you that he needs you to go do something that's kingdom work. Because he's not done with you just because of a choice you made.
Yeah. Neat piece of scripture here too, or what we're going to land on here at the end, is Exodus 3:16. Have I heard 3:16 somewhere before?
I think so.
John 3:16?
Yeah.
John 3:16 is about God so loved the world. Exodus 3:16 is God said, I've been watching closely. God has been watching the world closely. He has always been watching the world very closely. He is watching you very closely. He is watching me very closely. He is watching for those moments where he is going to intervene, where he is going to, what we see, help the people of Israel.
And I think there are people, even Christians, that believe that God is watching you to look for you to mess up. And he's not. He's not looking for you to mess up, because guess what? You're going to mess up.
Moses messed up.
He's looking for where exactly what you said. He can intervene. He can connect with you. He can take you to a little deeper relationship with him through what you went through. So I don't think anyone wants to admit, glad I went through a divorce, glad my child has this disability that has just made my life very difficult, glad this, glad that. God's not expecting us to say any of that. But he's saying, will you open your heart? I've been watching you closely, and all I want is a deeper relationship with you.
Yeah. John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he sent his son. That's how much he loves us. He's watching us closely. Why would we deny him?
Yeah. So we encourage you this week, don't look and think that God is watching for what you're going to mess up in. You're going to mess up. Promise, we do. But I want you to think about it on the flip side of he's watching a place to connect with you. So the question, before you can get to what I just suggested, is, do you believe God is watching your life closely?
Yeah. Every piece
Do
of
you
it.
believe?
Do you believe that?
And can you believe that it's for a place to connect with you, not to judge you and not to call you out or send wrath upon you?
Maybe give you a calling that you've not yet lived into.
And because of your life and circumstances, he can use you in a way he could have never used you before. Now that's a good word. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on TGIF. Bye.